I was sitting right there, front row at my father's attorney's office, when he looked me dead in the eye and said, "You'll understand one day. You don't need to be in the will." My name wasn't just missing. It was replaced by his new wife's son, someone I'd barely known for 2 years. No warning. No explanation. Just complete erasure. The lawyer slid papers across the polished oak table. My eyes scanned the words, but my brain couldn't process them fast enough. Where my name should have been, I saw Trevor Kane listed as primary beneficiary. The lake house my mother loved. The investment accounts. Everything. My throat tightened. My hands went cold. The man who raised me, who I'd sacrificed everything to support after Mom died, was cutting me out like I was a mistake. His new wife, Sandra, sat beside him with this smug little smile that made my stomach turn. She touched his arm gently, like she was comforting him through this difficult moment. Difficult for him. "Dad," I whispered, voice cracking. "You promised Mom the lake house would be mine." "Let it go, Mara," he said, finally looking away. I stood up. The room tilted slightly. As I walked toward the door, nobody stopped me. If you're watching this video, please like, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're watching my revenge story from. I want to know how far it has traveled. My name is Mara Ellison, and I just found out my father wrote me out of his will while giving everything to his new wife's son. But I wasn't always the outsider. I used to be everything to him. When Mom died 7 years ago, I was 15. Cancer took her in 6 brutal months. Dad fell apart completely. He couldn't function, couldn't work, couldn't even remember to eat. So I became the parent. I gave up my acceptance to art school upstate. Stayed local instead. Took online classes at community college while making sure he ate breakfast, went to therapy appointments, didn't drink himself into oblivion. My friends went off to universities. I stayed home. Everyone said I was so mature, so responsible. What they meant was I disappeared into his grief. I stopped painting. Stopped dreaming. I became the caretaker, the good daughter, the one who sacrificed without complaint. For 2 years, it was just us. Then he met Sandra at some grief support group. She was a widow too, with a grown son from her first marriage. Dad started smiling again. I was happy for him, genuinely. He deserved to move forward. I just didn't realize moving forward meant erasing me completely. The elevator ride down from the lawyer's office felt like falling. My phone buzzed in my purse. I ignored it. Probably my friend asking how the meeting went. How could I even explain this? Outside, the afternoon sun felt too bright. I walked 3 blocks before I realized I was heading in the wrong direction. My car was parked behind the building. I turned around, feeling numb and stupid and small. That's when I checked my phone. The notification wasn't from a friend. It was an email with the subject line, Ellison Family Trust Inquiry Urgent. I stopped walking. The sender was someone named Eleanor A. Benson, Estate Law. I didn't recognize the name. My finger hovered over the screen, then I opened it. "Ms. Ellison, this office has been attempting to reach you regarding your grandmother's estate. Recent inquiries have prompted us to locate the original trust documents. You may want to sit down. Please contact us at your earliest convenience regarding matters that require your immediate attention and signature." My grandmother. Mom's mother. She died 3 years ago, before Mom got sick. I barely remembered the funeral. Dad had handled everything and told me there was nothing left, just some old furniture nobody wanted. But now this email suggested otherwise. I sat in my car and stared at that email for 20 minutes. My grandmother's face came back to me in fragments. Sharp blue eyes. Silver hair always perfectly styled. She wore silk scarves and real pearls and spoke in this calm, measured way that made you listen. The last time I saw her, she was in hospice. I was 12. She'd motioned me closer to her bed, while everyone else was in the hallway. Her hand felt like paper in mine. "If anything ever happens," she'd whispered, so quiet I almost missed it, "look inside the blue box. It's in your room, behind the winter sweaters in your closet. Nobody knows about it except me and you now. Promise me you'll remember." I'd promised, confused but obedient. Then she'd squeeze my hand once and let go. She died 2 days later. The blue box. I'd completely forgotten about it. After she died, after Mom got sick, after everything fell apart, it had slipped from my memory like so many other things from my childhood. But it was still there. Had to be. Unless someone had cleaned out that closet during one of Dad's purges after Mom died. I started the car and drove straight home. The house I grew up in looked different now. Dad and Sandra had redecorated completely. Gone were Mom's watercolor landscapes and family photos. Now everything was beige and minimalist and impersonal. Like our history had been erased along with Mom's presence. I went straight to my old bedroom, which Sandra had turned into a wellness space with yoga mats and meditation cushions. But the closet was still there, still full of old things nobody had bothered sorting. I dug through boxes and plastic bins. Winter coats I'd outgrown. High school yearbooks. My hands were shaking as I reached the back corner, behind a stack of sweaters that smelled like mothballs and memory. And there it was. A blue metal box, about the size of a shoebox, with a small lock on the front. I sat on the floor and opened it. The lock wasn't engaged. Inside was a worn leather journal, a small brass key attached to a label, and a folded letter in my grandmother's elegant handwriting. Mara, the letter began. If you're reading this, then I'm gone, and you need answers. This is yours, not theirs. Trust no one but the attorney listed below. Everything I built was meant for you. Never forget that. The attorney's name was right there at the bottom of the letter. Eleanor A. Benson. The same woman who'd just emailed me. My hands trembled as I opened the journal. The pages were filled with my grandmother's neat script. Dates going back 20 years. Property records. Investment accounts. Something called the Ellison Foundation. Notes about lawyers and estate planning and protection clauses. And my name, written over and over. Everything to Mara. Protect Mara. She must never know until the time is right. The last entry was dated 3 weeks before she died. I don't trust what will happen after I'm gone. He's already asking questions about money. He thinks I don't see it. But I see everything. This has to be sealed tight. Nobody can touch what's meant for her. He. My father. She was writing about my father. My chest felt tight. Had Dad known about this? Had he been trying to access something of hers and been denied? The pieces weren't fitting together yet, but the shape of something ugly was emerging. I pulled out my phone and dialed the number on Eleanor Benson's business card, which had been tucked into the journal. A woman answered on the second ring. Benson Estate Law. This is Mara Ellison. I just received your email, and I found my grandmother's journal. There was a pause. Then, carefully, you're finally calling. We've been expecting you. Eleanor Benson's office was nothing like my father's lawyer's gleaming downtown suite. It was in an old converted house in a quiet neighborhood, with overstuffed bookshelves and a desk that had seen decades of use. Eleanor herself was probably 60, with gray hair in a practical bob and reading glasses on a chain. She gestured for me to sit in a worn leather chair across from her desk. Your grandmother was one of my first clients, she said, pulling out a thick file. She came to me 23 years ago, right after your mother married your father. She wanted to make sure certain assets remained protected. Protected from what? From your father, primarily. Eleanor's voice was gentle but firm. Your grandmother loved her daughter, but she didn't trust your father's financial judgment. And she wanted to make sure that no matter what happened, you would be taken care of. She opened the file and pushed it toward me. I saw my name on document after document. Trusts. Investment accounts. Property deeds. Your grandmother left you a trust fund worth approximately $2.3 million. It's been growing for over 20 years. She also left you a controlling stake in the Ellison Foundation, a private charitable organization she established. Your father has been serving as acting director, but he never had actual ownership. The room seemed to tilt. 2.3 million? Plus the foundation assets. Your grandmother was a very wealthy woman, Mara, and she made sure none of it could be touched by your father or included in any divorce settlement or bankruptcy. It's yours. Always has been. I couldn't breathe properly. Eleanor slid a glass of water across her desk and waited while I took several long sips. Why didn't anyone tell me? I finally asked. The trust was structured to release to you upon your 25th birthday, which is next month. Your grandmother wanted you to have some life experience first. She worried that if you knew too early, it might change how you made decisions. Or that your father might try to influence you. He doesn't know about this? Eleanor's expression shifted, became more guarded.
He knows something exists.
He's been making inquiries for years, especially after your mother died. But the legal protections your grandmother put in place are ironclad. He can't access any of it. And the foundation. She paused. That's where things get complicated. She pulled out another document and pointed to a specific clause. Section 14. This clause gives you full authority over the Ellison Foundation effective immediately upon your request. Your father has been operating it as director, but he's been doing so only because you hadn't claimed your position yet. The moment you do, his authority ends. What exactly does the foundation do? Eleanor's face went very still. Officially, it makes charitable donations and supports community programs. But I've been reviewing the recent financial records, and there are some transactions that concern me. Large property donations, transfers to shell companies, overvalued assets. Your father may have been using the foundation for purposes your grandmother never intended. You mean he's been stealing? I mean it needs to be investigated. And now that you're about to take control, everything he's done will become your legal responsibility unless we act carefully. I left Eleanor's office with my head spinning. She'd given me copies of everything. The trust documents, the foundation records, the full accounting of my grandmother's estate. It was in a banker's box that felt impossibly heavy. In my car, I just sat for a while. My whole life, I'd thought we had nothing. That Mom's medical bills had wiped us out. That I needed to sacrifice my dreams because we were barely getting by. But my grandmother had left me millions. And Dad had known something existed. He'd been asking questions, according to Eleanor. Trying to access it.
Failed.
And then what? Written me out of his own will in revenge. Given everything to Sandra's son instead?
My phone rang.
Dad's name appeared on the screen. I almost didn't answer. But something made me pick up. Mara. His voice sounded strained. We need to talk about today. I know you're upset, but you have to understand. Why didn't you tell me about Grandma's trust? Silence. Long and heavy. What are you talking about? He finally said, but I could hear it in his voice. He knew exactly what I was talking about. The trust fund. The foundation. The estate lawyer who's been trying to reach me. Mara, that's complicated. Your grandmother had some old accounts, but there's nothing substantial. I've looked into it. There's no point getting your hopes up about. $2.3 million. I kept my voice steady. That's what Eleanor Benson says the trust is worth. Plus my controlling interest in the foundation you've been running. Does that sound like nothing to you? The silence on the other end lasted so long I thought he'd hung up. Then I heard him breathing, heavy and agitated. You don't understand how these things work, he said finally. That money isn't just sitting there waiting for you. It's tied up in investments and legal structures. Your grandmother didn't trust anyone. Not even her own family. She made everything so complicated that it's essentially worthless. Eleanor says I can access it next month when I turn 25. Eleanor Benson is a washed-up estate lawyer who doesn't understand modern finance. Look, Mara, I didn't tell you about this because I didn't want you to waste your time chasing something that won't materialize. I was protecting you. My grip tightened on the phone. Like you protected me today when you wrote me out of your will? When you gave everything to Trevor? This is exactly why I made that decision. His voice rose, defensive and angry. You're being entitled. Ungrateful. I've given you everything. A home, an education, support through your mother's death. And this is how you repay me? By digging through old family business and making accusations. Something broke loose in my chest. I gave up art school for you. I stayed home for 2 years to take care of you. I put my entire life on hold while you grieved, and you call me ungrateful. You made choices. Nobody forced you to stay. You couldn't even feed yourself, Dad. You would have fallen apart without me. Well, maybe I needed to fall apart. Maybe staying was about control, not care. You wanted to be needed. The accusation hit me like a slap. I ended the call without responding. My hands were shaking so badly, I had to put the phone down. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the conversation with Dad, the meeting with Eleanor, the years since Mom died, trying to see the pattern I'd been too close to notice. Around midnight, I started going through the documents Eleanor had given me. The foundation records were dense and technical, but certain things jumped out. Properties donated at inflated values. Transfers to limited liability companies with names I didn't recognize. Consulting fees paid to firms that seemed to exist only on paper. And one property in particular caught my eye. The lake house. The one Mom loved, where we spent every summer of my childhood. The one Dad promised would be mine someday. According to the foundation records, Dad had donated it to the foundation 3 years ago for a tax write-off. Then, 6 months later, he transferred it to an LLC called Kane Holdings. I searched Kane Holdings online. The registered agent was Trevor Kane, Sandra's son. My father had taken the house my mother wanted me to have, donated it to a foundation I apparently controlled, and then given it to his stepson, all while telling me it was still in the family and would be mine someday. The betrayal was so calculated, so deliberate. It took my breath away. I grabbed my laptop and started a new document. If I was going to take control of this foundation, I needed to understand exactly what he'd done. I spent the next week buried in research. Eleanor connected me with a forensic accountant who specialized in nonprofit fraud. His name was Vincent Torres, and he had the kind of tired cynicism that comes from seeing the worst of human greed. Your father's been running a classic scheme, Vincent explained during our meeting. He inflates the value of properties, donates them to the foundation for tax benefits, then transfers them at lower values to entities he controls. The foundation looks charitable on paper, but it's essentially a money laundering operation. Is it illegal? Very. The IRS takes nonprofit fraud seriously. If we report this, he'll face audits, penalties, possibly criminal charges depending on how deep it goes. I thought about Dad's face at the lawyer's office. The way he'd looked through me like I didn't matter. The years I'd spent caring for him, believing we were a team. What do I need to do? Vincent opened his laptop. First, you formally claim your position as director of the foundation. That puts everything in your name legally. Then we conduct a full internal audit. Document everything. After that, you have choices about how to proceed. Eleanor had been quiet during this conversation, but now she spoke. Mara, understand what this means. If you take control of the foundation and expose what he's done, you'll destroy your father financially. His reputation will be ruined. He could go to prison. He wrote me out of his will, I said quietly. He gave away my mother's house. He's been stealing from an organization my grandmother created to help people. Why should I protect him? You shouldn't, Eleanor said. I just want you to be certain. I met her eyes. I'm certain. The next day, I drove out to the lake house. I hadn't been there since Mom's funeral. Dad always had excuses when I suggested visiting. Now I understood why. The house looked different. Fresh paint, new deck, expensive landscaping. A Tesla sat in the driveway with a vanity plate that read TRVR. Trevor's car. I parked on the street and just looked at it. All the summers Mom and I spent here, swimming in the lake, painting on the porch, reading in the hammock strung between 2 oak trees. This house held every good memory of my childhood, and Dad had given it away. As I sat there, the front door opened. Trevor came out, phone pressed to his ear, laughing about something. He was 24, just a year younger than me, with an easy confidence that came from never having to struggle. He saw my car, squinted, then his expression shifted to recognition. For a second, I thought he might come over. Instead, he turned his back and went inside. I pulled out my phone and took photos. The house, the car, the property. Evidence that the foundation's donated asset was now being used as a personal residence. Vincent was going to love this. My 25th birthday fell on a Tuesday. I spent it in Eleanor's office, signing documents that transferred control of the Ellison Foundation to me. The ink was still drying when Vincent sent his preliminary audit report. The numbers were worse than we'd thought. Over the past 3 years, Dad had misappropriated approximately $800,000 in foundation assets. Properties donated at inflated values, then transferred out at fractions of their worth. Consulting fees paid to shell companies. Even direct cash transfers disguised as charitable grants. He's been systematic about it, Vincent noted. Started small after your grandmother died, then got bolder when nobody questioned him. He probably figured the foundation was his once she was gone. But it was never his, I said. It was always mine. Eleanor nodded. Your grandmother knew what she was doing. Every protection she put in place, every clause she included, it was all designed to prevent exactly this. I stared at the report. My father's theft wasn't just about money. It was about erasing my grandmother's legacy, betraying my mother's memory, and stealing my future. All while I'd been busy sacrificing my dreams to take care of him. What happens now? I asked. Vincent exchanged a look with Eleanor. Now you decide. We can handle this privately, force restitution and his resignation. Or we can file formal complaints with the IRS and State Attorney General. The second option means criminal investigation. I thought about Trevor living in my mother's house, about Sandra's smug smile at the lawyer's office, about Dad's voice on the phone, calling me entitled and ungrateful. File the complaints, I said. All of them. The first bomb dropped 3 weeks later when the IRS notified Dad that the foundation was under investigation. He called me 17 times that day. I didn't answer. The second bomb came when the State Attorney General's office sent him a letter requesting documents related to foundation management. That's when he showed up at my apartment. I watched through the peephole as he pounded on the door. Mara, I know you're in there. We need to talk about this. You're making a huge mistake. I opened the door, but left the chain on. I'm not making any mistakes, Dad. I'm fixing yours. His face was red, eyes wild. You filed complaints against me? Against your own father? After everything I've done for you? Everything you've done? You mean stealing from Grandma's foundation? Giving away Mom's house? Writing me out of your will? My voice stayed calm, which seemed to enrage him more. That foundation was supposed to be mine. Your grandmother promised me I could manage it. Manage, not steal from. There's a difference. You self-righteous little. He caught himself, but the rage in his eyes said everything. You think you're so smart, but you've just destroyed our entire family. When this is over, you'll have nothing. No father, no family, no home. Was it worth it? I looked at him, this man I'd spent years caring for, and felt nothing but tired relief. I already had nothing, Dad. You made sure of that. I'm just taking back what was mine. The investigation moved faster than anyone expected. The evidence was overwhelming, and Dad had been sloppy. Within 2 months, the findings were clear. Dad had misappropriated over $900,000 from the foundation. He'd filed false tax returns, created fraudulent donation receipts, and transferred assets to entities he controlled through Sandra and Trevor. The property fraud alone was enough for criminal charges. The State Attorney General offered him a deal. Plead guilty to reduce charges, pay full restitution, serve probation, and cooperate with recovering the misappropriated assets. The alternative was trial and likely prison time. He took the deal. The news spread through our small community like wildfire. The local paper ran a headline, "Prominent Foundation Director Admits to Fraud." Dad's colleagues distanced themselves. The country club quietly revoked his membership. Sandra filed for divorce. I learned about the divorce from Eleanor. She's claiming she knew nothing about the fraud, trying to protect her own assets. Will it work? Probably not. She benefited directly from several transfers. The prosecutors are looking at charging her as well. I should have felt satisfaction. Instead, I just felt empty. This was my father. Despite everything, he was still the man who'd taught me to ride a bike, who'd clapped the loudest at my middle school art show, who'd held me when Mom died. But he was also the man who'd betrayed everyone who loved him. And sometimes people have to face consequences. The civil lawsuits came next. Vincent helped me file claims against Dad, Sandra, and Trevor to recover the misappropriated assets. The lake house was the biggest fight. Trevor argued he'd purchased it fairly from Kane Holdings, that he had no knowledge of the property's fraudulent transfer from the foundation. His lawyer tried to paint him as an innocent third party. But Vincent had found text messages between Trevor and Sandra discussing the foundation, the tax benefits, the way they were finally getting what they deserved from the old lady's money. Old lady meaning my grandmother. The judge wasn't sympathetic. In a cold courtroom that smelled like old wood and stale coffee, the ruling came down. The lake house would be returned to the foundation, which I controlled. Trevor would receive nothing for his supposed purchase. Any improvements he'd made were considered gifts to the foundation. Trevor screamed in the courtroom, called me a thief, a manipulator, said I'd ruined his life out of jealousy. Security had to escort him out while his lawyer apologized to the judge. I sat quietly through all of it, hands folded in my lap. When it was over, Eleanor touched my shoulder. You okay? I got my mother's house back, I said. That's what matters. But getting the house back meant dealing with what Trevor had done to it. When I finally walked through it with Eleanor and Vincent, my chest ached with every step. All of Mom's touches were gone. The built-in bookshelves she'd painted yellow. The window seat where we'd read together. The kitchen tiles she'd picked out one by one at the salvage yard. Everything had been ripped out, modernized, made generic. In the master bedroom where my parents used to sleep, where Mom died, Trevor had installed a massive TV and gaming setup. Empty beer cans littered the nightstand. I stood in that room and cried for the first time since this all started. Not angry tears, just sad ones. Mourning everything I'd lost.
Mom, Dad.
The family I'd thought we were. Eleanor waited in the hallway, giving me space. When I came out, she said gently, "We can fix it. Restore it. Make it yours again." I shook my head. Not mine. The foundation's. That's what Grandma intended. What will you do with it? I looked around at the house that held so much pain and love. Turn it into something good. Over the next 6 months, I worked with architects and designers to convert the lake house into a retreat center for young people aging out of foster care. A place where they could learn life skills, get counseling, prepare for independence. I called it the Ellison House after my grandmother and mother both. The foundation funded it entirely. Vincent helped me restructure the organization, hire proper oversight, create real charitable programs. Everything my grandmother had intended when she created it. Dad's restitution payments came in slowly, garnished from the small job he'd managed to find working in a friend's insurance office. He'd lost almost everything. The house he'd shared with Sandra was in foreclosure. His retirement accounts had been seized to pay fines. He was living in a studio apartment downtown alone. Part of me wondered if I should feel guilty. I didn't. The night before the Ellison house opened, I sat on the newly built deck and watched the sunset over the lake. The same view Mom had loved. I'd hung one of her watercolors in the main room, a painting of this exact scene.
My phone rang.
Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Mara? Dad's voice was quiet, smaller than I'd ever heard it. Don't hang up. Please. I wanted to say I'm sorry. I waited. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't deserve it. But I need you to know that I'm sorry. For all of it. For what I did to you, to your mother's memory, to Mom's foundation. I was angry and bitter, and I took it out on everyone who loved me. Why? I asked. Why did you do it? He was quiet for a long moment. Because I felt worthless. After your mother died, I felt like I'd failed at everything. And then your grandmother made it clear she didn't trust me with the foundation. That she'd chosen you instead. It made me feel small and inadequate. So, I took what I thought should have been mine. It was never yours, Dad. I know that now. His voice cracked. I destroyed everything trying to prove I mattered. And all I proved was that your grandmother was right not to trust me. I closed my eyes. I spent 2 years taking care of you. I gave up everything to make sure you survived losing Mom. I know. And you repaid that by erasing me from your will and stealing my inheritance.
I know. I'm sorry, Mara. I'm so sorry.
We didn't reconcile. I told Dad I accepted his apology, but needed space. Maybe someday we could rebuild something. But not now. Not while the wounds were still fresh. The Ellison house opened to its first residents in September. 6 young people aging out of foster care, all of them looking lost and scared and desperately hopeful. I watched them explore the house, choose their rooms, start to believe they might have a future. One girl, about 17 with dark braids and suspicious eyes, stopped in front of my mother's watercolor. "This is really pretty," she said. "Who painted it?" "My mom. She loved this house. She always said it was a place where people could heal." The girl nodded slowly. "Think that's true?" "I hope so." The foundation grew. With proper management and Vincent's careful oversight, the trust fund my grandmother left generated enough income to support multiple programs. Scholarships for first-generation college students. Small business grants for women entrepreneurs. Art therapy programs in schools. Everything Dad had tried to steal became something beautiful.
I started painting again, too.
Set up a studio in my apartment and worked in the evenings after foundation meetings. My first real piece was a portrait of my grandmother, painted from memory and old photographs. I hung it in the foundation's office, right above the mission statement she'd written decades ago. Build something that lasts longer than resentment. A year after everything fell apart, I got a letter from Trevor. It came to the foundation office, forwarded through his lawyer. "I know you have no reason to read this," it began. "But I need to try. I was wrong. About everything. My mom raised me to believe that your family owed us something. That your grandmother was selfish, that your dad was weak, that you were in the way. I believed her because it was easier than admitting we were the problem." He went on for 3 pages, apologizing, explaining, trying to make sense of how he'd justified living in my mother's house, spending my grandmother's money, treating me like an obstacle instead of a person. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," the letter concluded. "I just wanted you to know that I understand what we took from you. And I'm sorry. You turn your pain into something good. That's more than I'll ever do." I read it twice, then filed it away. Maybe his apology was genuine. Maybe it wasn't. Either way, it didn't change anything. What changed things was the quiet work. The young people finding stability at the Ellison house. The students getting scholarships. The programs spreading to other communities. My grandmother's legacy, protected and amplified, exactly as she'd intended. On what would have been my mother's 50th birthday, I drove out to the cemetery alone. I brought flowers and one of my new paintings, a watercolor of the lake house as she would have remembered it. I told her about everything. The foundation, the house, Dad's betrayal and downfall. The way I'd fought back and won. "I wish you could see it, Mom," I said to the gravestone. The Ellison house. The kids were helping. Grandma would be so proud. I think you would be too. The wind picked up, rustling through the oak trees overhead. I sat there for a long time, just being present with my grief and my triumph and my complicated love for the family I'd lost. My phone buzzed. Eleanor, asking about a grant application we were reviewing. The foundation never stopped, and I was grateful for that. Staying busy meant staying focused. Staying focused meant not drowning in everything I'd survived. As I walked back to my car, I saw a figure standing by a grave several rows over.
Dad.
He hadn't noticed me yet. His shoulders were slumped, head bowed. He was at Mom's grave. For a moment, I considered going over, saying something. But what would be the point? We'd said everything that mattered in that phone call. The rest was just time and distance and healing that couldn't be rushed. I got in my car and drove away. 2 years after taking control of the foundation, I was invited to speak at a women's leadership conference. They wanted me to talk about protecting family legacies and standing up to financial abuse. I almost said no. Public speaking terrified me, and telling my story meant reliving the worst moments. But Eleanor convinced me it mattered. "Other people need to hear this," she said. "Especially young women who don't know they have the right to question authority.
To protect themselves."
to demand better. So I went, stood on a stage in front of 200 people and told them everything. About Dad's betrayal, Grandma's protection, the Foundation's restoration. About how the hardest battles are often with people who claim to love us. The thing about family, I said toward the end, is that it's supposed to be built on trust and love. When someone violates that, it's not your responsibility to keep protecting them. It's your responsibility to protect yourself and honor the people who actually cared enough to build something lasting. The applause caught me off guard. People stood. Some were crying. Afterward, at least 30 women came up to tell me their own stories of family betrayal, inheritance theft, parental manipulation. You gave me permission to stop feeling guilty, one woman said, gripping my hands. I thought I was a bad daughter for fighting back. But you showed me I was just being strong. I drove home that night feeling something shift inside me. This wasn't just about getting revenge or claiming what was mine. It was about breaking cycles. Showing other people that you could survive betrayal and build something better from the wreckage. 3 years. That's how long it took for everything to settle into something like normalcy. The foundation was thriving. The Ellison house had expanded to include 2 additional properties. I'd hired a full staff and stepped back into more of an advisory role, which gave me time to paint and live and breathe. Dad and I exchanged occasional emails. Brief, polite, careful. He'd completed his probation and was working steadily. He'd started therapy. We weren't close, might never be again, but the active anger had faded into something quieter. Disappointment, maybe. Grief for what could have been. Sandra had moved to Arizona and stopped contacting any of us. Trevor, according to mutual acquaintances, was working in his uncle's construction business and keeping his head down. The people who'd enabled them, the friends who'd chosen sides, they fell away too. I built new connections. People who understood boundaries and integrity. People who didn't expect me to set myself on fire to keep others warm. On my 20th birthday, I stood in my apartment, looking at the wall I'd turned into a gallery. My paintings. My grandmother's photo. My mother's watercolor. The blue box from my closet, now a symbol of secrets kept and truths revealed. Eleanor called to wish me happy birthday. How does it feel, she asked, being on the other side of all that chaos? I thought about it. Quiet. I finally said, in a good way. You did something remarkable, Mara. You protected your grandmother's legacy, honored your mother's memory, and held people accountable. That takes courage most people don't have. Last week, I went back to the Ellison house for their anniversary celebration. 3 years of operation, 47 young people, helped into stable independence. The success stories were overwhelming. One of the first residents, the girl who had admired my mother's watercolor, was now studying social work at the State University on a foundation scholarship. She gave a speech about how the Ellison house had saved her life, given her hope when she'd had none. I stood in the back and cried happy tears. After the celebration, I walked down to the lake alone. The dock had been rebuilt, stronger than before. I sat at the edge with my feet dangling over the water, watching the sunset paint the sky in oranges and purples. My phone buzzed. A text from Dad. Saw the article about the Ellison house anniversary. Your mom would be so proud. I'm proud too, for what that's worth. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I typed back, thank you. Nothing more. Nothing less. The blue box sat on my desk at home now, in my office where I could see it every day. Inside, I'd added new things. The final legal documents declaring the foundation secure. A photo from the Ellison house opening. A letter from a scholarship recipient. Evidence that what my grandmother had protected, what my mother had loved, what I had fought for, it all mattered. I thought he'd taken everything from me that day in the lawyer's office. My inheritance, my family, my place in the world. But really, he just forced me to find what was mine all along. My grandmother's trust wasn't just money. It was belief. Belief that I was strong enough to stand alone. Wise enough to see through manipulation. Brave enough to demand better. She'd left me more than wealth. She'd left me weapons. And I'd used them not to destroy, but to build. The water lapped gently against the dock posts. Somewhere in the house behind me, young people were laughing, making dinner, planning futures they never thought possible. This place that had once been my family's private escape was now a sanctuary for people who'd never had one. And that felt right. That felt like justice. Not revenge, redemption. I pulled out my phone and opened my notes app. Started writing down ideas for the Foundation's next project. There was still so much work to do, so many people who needed help, so many legacies worth protecting. My father had tried to erase me. Instead, he'd given me clarity. Shown me exactly who I was when everything was stripped away. And who I was, it turned out, was my grandmother's granddaughter. My mother's daughter. Someone who understood that real strength isn't about holding power over others. It's about using whatever power you have to build something that outlasts you. The sun dropped below the horizon, leaving the sky bruised purple and gold. I stood up, brushed off my jeans, and walked back toward the house. Toward the lights and voices and life happening inside. I'd opened the blue box like my grandmother told me to. Found the secrets, faced the truth, fought the battles. And on the other side of all that pain and betrayal, I'd found something better than inheritance. I'd found myself. I'd love to hear your thoughts. What does family mean to you? Please share below and subscribe to this channel for more stories like mine.